Hi, in this Chordious tutorial, we're going to explore one of the more advanced features of Chordious, the style editor. With the style editor, we can broadly apply changes to the stylings used in the diagrams that Chordious creates. This tutorial assumes that you already have Chordious installed and that you've already played around with the more basic features of the program. So if you haven't already, I'd recommend following the earlier tutorial videos first to get a feel for Chordious in general before doing this video. Otherwise, without further ado, let's get started. So, to get started here, I'm going to go into the diagram library where I have a collection ready for us to work with. So I have a variety of collections here, diagram collections from earlier tutorial videos, and I have one here called the Style Editor tutorial, which I've already created, and it has a couple diagrams in it. Let's say that I want to change the style of all the diagrams in this collection without having to individually edit each diagram as I would with the diagram editor. Well, to do that, we're going to use the style editor. So if you have a collection selected, you can either click on this little pen icon down here to edit the style for the collection, or you can right click and go to edit style. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now and open up style editor. Now what you'll see here in style editor at the top, we have selected style, which I'll go over in a second, a summary of that style, which is down here, which kind of lists out what that style consists of. And then down here you have a bunch of tabs that divide up the different style options that you can change. Now, if you've already watched the diagram editor video, you'll note that all of these options here are the same options that are available in the full diagram editor. The difference is we're going to be applying these in bulk across multiple diagrams. So back up here to the top, we have the selected style. And if I open this drop down, you'll see a variety of styles. And this is actually a hierarchy. So the way Chordious works is we start off with a default style. That is the style that is built into Chordious at the core, all the information about what the defaults are, how diagrams look, the font sizes, the colors, the spacing between lines, the thickness of the lines, margins, everything is all defined in this default style. In fact, if I select the default style, you'll see it all here. You'll see all of the different styles are all defined under each of these tabs. And you'll notice that each box is checked because they're defined in this style. And they're also grayed out because this is read-only. These are the styles that are built into Chordious that you can't just change on your own. And up at the top here, we have a whole list of all the different styles basically written out. So the default style here is all of these settings. So every setting, if I go to diagram, new diagrams, what's the default for strings and frets? 5 frets, 4 strings, so on and so forth. This is the entire summary of all the styles that are set in the default style. It is the default built-in Chordious style. So the way Chordious works is everything is built on top of this default style, and as we go down through the hierarchy, we have new styles that apply changes to the way diagrams look. So to do that, if I look at the app style just says, oh, I'm just basically, the summary of the app style is just the default style. And it's also read-only, you can't change that. It's for styles that are specific to the Chordious, this version of the Chordious app. And then we have the user style. This is the first place where we can make changes. You'll see now that all these checkboxes are now available. And the way that works is each of these checkboxes represents you wanting to override a previous style. So the user style is the app style, which is the default style. And so if I want to override the style I can go ahead and check one of the boxes, and you'll see now the summary changes. The user style is now defined as the app style plus the change of defining the orientation for the diagram. So if you have watched through the diagram editor video, you'll know that each one of these represent changes to the looks of the diagrams. And one of the most basic things you can do is change the default from vertical to horizontal. So I'm going to change it to horizontal, and so what we have here, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. You'll notice that the diagrams have now changed from vertical diagrams to horizontal diagrams. And that's great. If that's what we want, if we want horizontal diagrams, I can change it. And as you can see, they're changed here. But you'll note, now if I go into these other collections, we'll find that all of them have been changed to horizontal. All of these old collections are now all horizontal diagrams. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I don't want that for everything. So we'll go back to the style editor tutorial here. Let me bring up the style editor again. So you'll see right here, it doesn't have the orientation here. The orientation is set to horizontal because where we defined it, we had user style selected. So at the user style level, right, you have these different levels here in the hierarchy. The user style represents styles that you want applied to all diagrams across the entire application. Right, this is for you, the user. This gets saved in your user config file. And so if you have multiple users using Chordious on the computer, they can have their own separate user style. So here's the place where you want to make changes that will apply across all diagrams. If you decide that you want different fonts, there's always a different default font that you want, you can go in here and you can find all of the different fonts. Like for example, here's the title font. You can change the drop down and change it, right? You could go and change all the marks. You could change what the default font is. Same thing with fret labels, change the default font, and so on. Okay, so if for whatever reason there's some default style that you want applied to all the diagrams that you create, this is where you override them. It's in your user style. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and reset this. If I hit the reset button, that's basically going to uncheck all these overrides. And it'll prompt me if I want to do that, and I say yes. And now you'll see that the summary has changed. If I hit OK, you'll see that every diagram is all back to the vertical style it used to be. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the style editor. So we have user style. The next layer up, we have library style. Now, the library style applies to all diagrams that are in your collection, in collections in your diagram library. So the difference between these two is the user style will apply to all diagrams. So the diagrams that are in the library and all diagrams as they're created in the chord finder and the scale finders, or in any diagrams that you try to import. So this applies kind of globally. The library style only applies to diagrams you've actually saved off. So if you want to change the way diagrams look just when they're in your library, but you're fine seeing them as they are in the chord finder or in the scale finder, then you can just change the library style. That way, the chord finder and the scale finder always can look different than how they're actually finally saved. Okay, and then at the very bottom here, you have the actual collection style, which is just limits things to just this collection. So here, if I went in here and said, I want the orientation to be horizontal, and hit OK. Now you'll see this change to horizontal, but if I go to the other collections, they're not changed. They maintain the original vertical. So if I go here and I go on this particular collection and hit edit the style, you'll see the collection style doesn't have any changes to it. It's still vertical. Go back to the style editor, right? And I can edit the style. I can do more than just that. Obviously, there's way more options here. For example, if I wanted to add a thick black border around the diagram, I can hit OK, or I can even just hit apply. OK, and then you'll see now there's a border around those diagrams. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove those. Now another thing that you can do, let's say I set that back to normal. So we have these here, nothing's being overwritten. We're just using the default styles, inheriting those from Chordious. Now, you'll see down here, we have this button called Create a New Diagram. And that will create a new blank diagram with no marks, no text, no labels, nothing on it. So if I go and I press that, I now have a new blank diagram here that I can start filling out. And you'll see it has 1, 2, 3, 4 strings and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets. I can hit OK. I have this blank one here, that's fine. If I wanted to, let's say that's not what I want here. Let's say I want the default to be sized for a guitar with 6 strings, then maybe I would go into the style here, and then for new diagrams, I can set the number of strings to 6, maybe the number of frets to 7. If I hit OK, now if I create a new diagram, you'll see that it has 7 frets and 6 strings. Okay? So that's also in the style editor. You can change whether your default, again, just for this particular collection, you can say this is the default, or you can change it for any of the higher levels. For example, across the library or user, you can say, I always want new diagrams to have that many strings or so on. Okay, so we'll go ahead and clear those. As you can see, just like with the diagram editor itself, you can change and have different styles. You have the normal style for marks that all the marks will have in that collection in this case, but you can also change the styles for each of the other types. So if I do muted, you'll see that the muted marks don't have any text visible, they have the shape of an X, etc., and you can override that behavior and change it here. Say you wanted to change the color for muted marks or so on. So that's basically it. As you can see, because you can apply different styles at a collection level, you can very easily maintain different collections with different styles. That way, you could, for example, have a collection of diagrams. I go like this, say I delete this, delete this. Okay, so I have this collection here. Let's say I change the orientation to horizontal, and I change and give it a border. So now we have horizontal diagrams with a border. If I copy this, I'll leave it like that. You'll see it didn't actually copy all the style information. So all this copying did was copy the diagram information, not the style that was applied to the collection. Similarly, if I were to grab this diagram here and drag it into this collection, you'll see here it is, but the style is gone because the style was applied to the collection, not to the diagram itself. So it's important when using Chordious to decide where do you want your styles applied. Do you want your styles applied at the user level so it always looks that way? Do you want to change it so that it only applies to a particular collection? Or if you want the diagram itself to have the style, by going into the diagram editor, you can say that this diagram will always have that style regardless of where it moves. So if I go ahead and move it back here, you'll see that yes, it does indeed have the style that was applied to this collection. And similarly, I could go to another collection, like say this here, If I drag that in there, I'm going to hold Control and just I can copy it in. Now if I look in here, here's a C, but it now is changed according to the style of this collection. So using that, you can create collections that have a particular style you want. You could then go, for example, I have this style tutorial, I have this C in here, I could go ahead and close this. If I went into the chord finder, did a search, I don't know what this is set for. C major guitar, C major chord on a standard tune guitar. Let that run. And I save that selected into that collection we used before, style editor tutorial. Even though it looks like this in here, a vertical diagram with no border, I've saved a copy and close that. Go back to the library and go in here, and there's that C diagram that I just saved, except this collection says make all diagrams horizontal with a border around them. So in this way, you could predefine a collection. Say you're writing a book or you're creating worksheets or whatever printed material that you want. You could create a collection that has all the style information for all diagrams that are in that collection. And then you could use the chord finder or the scale finder to find chords or scales that you want to save off into that collection, and they will automatically get the style that matches everything else. And that way you can have different collections for different styles. Maybe you're printing a children's book and you're using a different set of fonts than you are in a professional book or whatever. And at the end of the day, if any one particular diagram is just not exactly what you want it to be, you can always, as I explained in the diagram editor tutorial, double click on an individual diagram and tweak that diagram so that it's perfect. Maybe you decide, there's a little too much space around here, so maybe for this particular diagram, I want to reduce the padding between the title, and so maybe I set that to 0. And when I do that, you'll see now there's a little less padding, the C is closer, and maybe I do OK. And now I've shrunk that diagram slightly, maybe to better fit wherever I'm actually going to be printing these diagrams. So that's it. That is covering the style editor for modifying the styles, whether across the entire application or just within individual collections. Thanks for watching.